Hey everyone, welcome to More Layers again. I'm Seth Mariano.
And I'm Jordan Smith. And now that we're in the month of July, we have finished the first half of 2025 already. Talk about time flying by, holy cow. Um, but hopefully, everyone's had a good year so far, and that the second half will be even better. Uh, and just in case this gets picked up on the mic, there is an AC unit where I am right now because it is a little bit warmer. So I apologize if that is a bit of a distraction, but we'll try not to put any more focus on it. As for today's episode, we thought, you know what? We've talked a bit before around specific sporting events, but now today is going to be dedicated to those, and particularly some of the most memorable ones.
Yeah, so we're going to discuss some memorable TV sports viewings that we've had that have been for reasons like unusual or special sentimental value, whatever, and we'll see what we come up with here.
Yep, and I'm sure this goes without question, but Super Bowl 59 was my first one. Uh, it's the most recent Super Bowl anyway. Plus, my team was in it and they won, so that made it memorable in of itself. But what also made it really memorable is that at this point, I and many other people were starting to get really, really tired of seeing the Kansas City Chiefs everywhere, especially since some of their wins didn't always seem 100% legitimate. But we get to the Super Bowl, and I was just thrilled to have my team there. I figured it would be really close, and then we get to the event, and it was absolutely insane because the Eagles kept scoring and scoring without the Chiefs really answering until like the last quarter of the game. But by then it was like 40 to zip.
Yeah, that was a good game for sure. Like you, I was kind of annoyed with the Chiefs kind of dominating the league for a while in there. To a more or less extent, they probably are still in a way, but it was kind of nice to see them get dethroned, honestly, for a change. And I remember I was watching the game with some friends, some of them mutual friends of ours, and just really just thinking about. I was just thinking about how bizarre like some of the circumstances were, like field goal kicks getting blown dead by flags, and that seemed to happen like most every time they tried for a field goal. And then the halftime show was pretty good, and I remember texting Jordan after the game was over, "Fly, Eagles, fly," which is kind of their fight song, and
Yep.
him telling me in reply, "I just did laps around the room." It was such a thrilling moment.
I really did because I covered the couch in Eagles merch, and when the Eagles won, I had an Eagles blanket that I tied around my neck as a cape and just started like flapping it around as they ran around the room in excitement. Uh, it was a glorious day. A lot of people were thrilled, even those who were not Eagles fans. Uh, I think what happened with the Chiefs is after Brady left the Patriots and then retired eventually, the NFL, in my eyes, had to find a new poster boy or golden child or whatever term you want to use. And they found that with Mahomes and the Chiefs. And they started treating them the same way they did Brady and the Patriots for a while. Uh, it was nice to see them get knocked down a few pegs. I don't know if it'll stay that way, but at least we stopped them from getting a three-peat.
Yeah, I think the Eagles did better than even I anticipated, honestly.
I wasn't expecting a complete blowout like that. I thought it was going to be a little bit more back and forth. Maybe the Eagles would start off strong, and then the Chiefs would catch up near the end and possibly take the game. But no, they scored like 30, 40 unanswered points. And then by the time the Chiefs really got going, it was too late. But that was not the only Super Bowl that was memorable to me. There were at least a couple others. Both of them had to do with Brady. One of them being the first time the Eagles won the Super Bowl, and that was against the Patriots in Super Bowl 52. This was memorable for me because I'm an Eagles fan, and it was the very first. It was. I don't think it was the first Super Bowl the Eagles were ever in.
No, it
but
wasn't.
It was
No, it wasn't.
It was not. Okay, thank you for verifying that. But yeah, I wasn't sure what to expect because it was against Brady. It's kind of similar with Mahomes. So how is this going to play out? And then there were some iconic moments in the game itself, let alone the entire thing. One of the most noteworthy was what's known as the Philly Special, which was a play that they did where somebody else snapped the ball and then passed it to Foles, who then caught it for a touchdown. It was one of the most recognizable trick plays. People still refer to it every so often. And it made it even sweeter because I think earlier in the game, Brady tried pretty much the exact same thing and failed. So I loved seeing that. But then what makes it even more memorable now is because this happened, I want to say, like a couple years or so before my dad passed away. And I was very thrilled looking back on it that I was able to see one Super Bowl win from my team watching with him. So it was very special. And now thinking about it, this last one that they just won is kind of even more special because while my mom didn't get to see the end of the season, she was definitely rooting for me and saw how well my team was doing. So she got to see at least the start of what would end up being another Eagles victory.
And Super Bowl 52, in a way, was kind of a full circle moment for the Eagles because I know the same team that they defeated in that one was the team that they last competed in the Super Bowl against. Happened to be Tom Brady and New England. So, and 13 years after that loss, they come back and win.
Yeah, and hopefully it won't take that long to get there again. I know if the Eagles start doing too well, people will start getting sick of seeing them, but we'll see what happens. And while I don't remember exactly which Super Bowl this is, the other one that really stands out was the one most people know with the Patriots and the Giants. This was the year where the Patriots, up to the Super Bowl, had not lost a single game that entire season, which frustrated a lot of people because up to that point, the only team in NFL history to ever do something like that was the 1972 Miami Dolphins. Granted, the rules were a little bit different and there were fewer games, but still. But we get to the Super Bowl. A lot of people were rooting for the Giants to stop Brady from having an undefeated season. In fact, my mom, even though she's a Dolphins fan, she got a shirt that said, even before the game came out, she got a shirt that said 18 wins and 1 giant loss. So she was definitely banking and hoping on the idea that the Giants would win. And I didn't see it happen necessarily, because when I was younger, when watching the Super Bowl, or when the Super Bowl was happening, I'd be at the house where I'm at now, actually, because I'm cat sitting for somebody at the moment. Except I'd be in the basement with a friend of mine while the people upstairs watched the game. All I knew is that whatever was going on was a good thing, because I kept hearing a lot of cheering, a lot of excited screaming. It was glorious to listen to because I knew Brady was getting his butt handed to him, at least to some degree, or some good things were happening. And then I come up near the end, and sure enough, by some God-given miracle, the Giants stopped the Patriots.
Yeah, the story even leading up to that Super Bowl is pretty interesting because the Giants hadn't been one of the best teams in the league in recent years leading up to it. They had some pretty inconsistent results, and
Yeah.
but then they got some new defensive players who kind of took them to the next level, and New England had also gotten some like additional offensive weapons to kind of step up their game a bit, and it seemed to work up until that game. And a lot of people were predicting New England was going to complete the sweep, take the Giants down. I remember even one analyst for the Fox network said Giants got no chance, but Giants obviously proved them wrong.
Yeah, they found a way to do it. In fact, while I can't prove this to be true, I would also like to think that the Giants knew that the Patriots were one game away from being undefeated, and that motivated them to put their best foot forward given how much was on the line. So it's like we got to pull out all the stops, we got to do our best plays, we got to shake things up, we got to get them off their rhythm. And if that was the case, it worked. But that is definitely some of the most memorable Super Bowls. But there was at least one NFL moment that I can think of. Well, two. I could probably keep thinking of more and more, but I'll keep it to two for the sake of time. One of them is a play that became known as the Miami Miracle. This is a game where the Dolphins were facing off against the Patriots. And they were down by, I want to say by 5 or something like that. And they were about halfway down the field or so. There was 7 seconds left on the clock. They had time for basically one big play. They had to score a touchdown on this last play to pull it off. But they snapped the ball, they lateraled it a couple times, and the person who ended up with the ball ran all the way down to the end, right past Gronkowski, who was waiting for him, and he scored the touchdown, which drove Dolphins fans and many other people nuts. In fact, one of the announcers referred to it as the lateral heard around the world. It was just so amazing to see. It definitely was a miracle, to say the least. And what made it even more dramatic, if you will, is somebody took like the most intense moment from My Heart Will Go On, the song from Titanic, and played that as he was approaching the end zone, which honestly really added to it. So if people haven't seen it yet, you can find it pretty easily by just going on YouTube or somewhere and typing in Miami Miracle. You will find it.
Yeah, I might have to watch.
I definitely think it would be cool. It's not like the most visually appealing play out there, but it definitely got more exciting as the play progressed. And then moving on from football, I did want to bring up one season of baseball. And this was around 2015, 2016. And the reason why I wanted to bring this one up is because in the films Back to the Future, like those franchises, they had predicted in those movies that around that time, I think it was, they said the Cubs would win. Like they'd win the World Series. And they were so close to being accurate. Like the Cubs were getting there, and people had their eyes glued to the Cubs because, like, Back to the Future couldn't possibly be predicting this decades in advance. The year they predicted was not correct, unfortunately. But the following year, I think the Cubs won the World Series. So they were off by only 1 year, which is still really good. But the fact that they were that close made that part of the season very memorable due to how Back to the Future almost predicted that season.
Yeah, super close. Yeah, they did get some things right. Like like digital wall-mounted televisions, that kind of thing. They predicted those pretty accurately, though. So they got that right.
Didn't they also predict something about automatic shoelacing, like shoelace ties?
That sounds right. Now, my memory's a bit fuzzy on that, but yeah. Obviously, we don't have like dehydrated instant Pizza Hut like we saw in the second film quite yet, but yeah, the shoelace thing it might be. I don't remember though.
I remember somebody talking about it, but anyway, yeah, that was a memorable baseball season. Maybe other predictions will come true in the future. And then I also wanted to bring up NASCAR, specifically the Sprint Cup. And the reason for that is because I actually used to watch it a lot when I was growing up. And I became a fan of Jimmy Johnson when he was racing in that series. Around the time he won his second or third Sprint Cup. It wasn't necessarily because he was winning. I think it was partly because I liked the color scheme. The number was cool. As a young kid, I was easily fascinated by things like that. And then as I got more invested, he suddenly started winning Sprint Cup after Sprint Cup after Sprint Cup multiple years in a row. I think he ended up winning 7 in total.
Yeah, 5 in a row. 5 of them were consecutive, yeah.
And each year that was happening, I kept getting more excited because I figured this is probably a once-in-a-lifetime occurrence. Because I think only 2 other people in NASCAR history even won that many. But I don't know if any of them won that many in a row. So it's like, I'm watching history unfold right now.
Yeah, and it got even better from there. So, interestingly, Jimmy Johnson made his, I think he made his debut in Cup around the time that Dale Earnhardt Sr. fatally crashed.
Yeah.
But Jimmy actually ended up tying him and Richard Petty for the most Cup titles all time with 7 apiece, which in itself was pretty exciting to see him achieve.
Yeah, he will definitely be a NASCAR legend for a while, because with there being only 3 people who've won that many, it's not a common occurrence.
No.
But maybe people will improve in the future, who knows. But I was glad to see him be one of the only 3 people to pull something like that off.
Yeah.
And then the last 2 things I thought of were from this past Summer Olympics. And one of them, I forget what the actual event was called. I just know that it involved guns. And people were using all this high-tech equipment, and they were all doing really well. But then there was this one guy, I think he was from Turkey. He made that event memorable because he was so casual about it. He didn't really use any high-tech equipment to help his aim or whatever. He just stood there with one hand in his pocket, pointing the gun at whatever he was aiming at. And I think he was a late addition too, like he wasn't on the Olympic team for a long time. But he just literally comes out of nowhere, is extremely casual about it, and he ended up on the podium with a silver medal. And so many people were watching that. They were fascinated. They started making memes, jokes. They started talking about how skillful this guy was despite not using any equipment and just standing like he was there for a weekly shootout practice or whatever. But he quickly became a legend in many Olympic fans' eyes. I wish I could remember his name, but I'm pretty sure he was from Turkey. And you can easily find photos of him in his well-documented stance. And then the other one, and this is the last one I had written down, was also from this past Olympics, and it was from a new event that I don't think is coming back. I think this was a one and done deal due to the reception behind it, but it was basically an event that I forget what the event's official name was, but it was basically competitive breakdancing. And a lot of people, just by hearing that, probably know where I'm going with this. But whereas this Turkish gunslinger did really well, and that was memorable, the reason why this breakdancing competition was memorable was because of the person who, points-wise, probably did the worst. She was from Australia, and I was watching this happen on TV. Like, this wasn't something I saw on YouTube later. Like, I was watching the competition as it was playing out, and some dancers were doing really well, and then whenever this Australian lady came out, it's like, I felt bad for her, but her dance moves were barely even dance moves. There may have been some breakdancing in there, but she quickly became the butt of many jokes. And it was definitely a spectacle, because I was watching and I'm like, what am I looking at right now? Like, one of her more infamous moves is when she would like tilt backwards and kind of stand like a kangaroo in a way. But this definitely got a lot of people talking. It's not necessarily something you want to be in the center of attention for, but it definitely kept people glued to their TV screens just to see, or at least try to figure out what was happening.
Yeah, well, E for effort, though.
Well, yeah, I definitely applaud her for going out there, doing whatever it was she did. I don't know if I'd have the guts to do that, especially since I'm not really a dancer. But, yeah, she definitely got her 15 minutes of fame, to say the least.
All right, well, I had a few of my own written down, and the first one was, I don't really watch racing as much as I used to anymore, but I remember there was a time I followed NASCAR pretty closely, and I was thinking of specifically the 2012 Daytona 500, which was memorable even for reasons like even before the race even started, because first it was postponed to noon the next day by rain, and then noon came around and I was waiting for it, and they come on and saying, it's going to be delayed a bit further. Finally, it ends up being at night, that Monday night.
And it's not even a short race either.
Yeah, 500 miles. Yeah, and then they finally get it underway, and then just a couple laps in or so, there's a big wreck or a big crash, and they play like one of the big names on the radio saying, we waited several hours and this is what happens to us.
Yeah, I wouldn't blame them if they were frustrated. And considering, if I remember correctly, the Daytona 500 is the race they always start with for the season. That is not how you want your season to start out.
No. And the craziness didn't even end there. I think it got down to like the last 40 laps, and they're under caution. Somebody loses control of their car and crashes into like the fuel tank or something, and causes this big spill on the track that causes a fire. And they had to put it out and spend 2 hours digging the surface up, repaving it before they could get going again. Yeah, literally 2 hours it took them to fix it.
Well, of course. I mean, that stuff can be dangerous.
Yeah.
I mean, granted, it's dangerous already, racing as fast as they are, with that many racing vehicles in a confined space. Yeah. But, yeah, that is something you don't want to mess with.
Yeah. So, yeah, it was pretty funny, that one. And then, for another bizarre reason, I put down the first game of the 2014 NBA Finals. I don't really watch basketball as much either. This was the first game of the Finals in 2014. Miami Heat at San Antonio Spurs. At this time, I believe LeBron was playing with the Heat. This was one of his... Yeah, this was his stint between his two stints with Cleveland.
Okay.
And the bizarre thing that happened, like, toward the end, and they lost the air conditioning in the arena, and it was a pretty hot night and this is San Antonio, Texas.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Holy cow.
Yeah. And then, but they just keep playing through it, and the Heat went on a bit of a rally, but it wasn't enough to come back and win that game, but, yeah. But for those reasons, it was a pretty wild night.
Yeah, I mean, I know their team name is called the Heat, but it wasn't supposed to be taken literally.
No. Yeah, I made a bizarre joke referring to that, like, on Twitter as I was watching, which I will not repeat, but...
Yeah, probably for the best. The fact that they kept playing, I will give them props for it, especially in Texas. Like, if it's Texas or Arizona, one of those states, it's usually not too friendly when it comes to the temperature. I don't remember what season this was, but there was another infamous basketball moment. I think it's one of the most infamous. And I think it had a nickname like Malice at the Palace or something like that.
Oh, yeah, I just saw the ESPN or whatever documentary on that. Yeah, so I know what you're talking about.
Okay, good. As long as we're on the same page. For those that don't know, I don't remember all the details, but this was a basketball game that seemed like any other at first, and then at some point, there was just an all-out brawl, not just with the players, but a lot of people in the stands as well. In fact, I think the whole thing kind of started when, if I remember this correctly, correct me if I'm wrong, if somebody in the stands was throwing something at one of the players, and then that player charged them, and then it just escalated from there.
I think technically it started with somebody fouling an opposing team player, and then things got heated up there. But then one guy kind of went to cool off, and then somebody threw something toward him, and then things got crazy.
It's kind of like the Miami Miracle. If you just search up the nickname, in this case, Malice at the Palace, you'll find what we're talking about.
Yeah. But then there's another football example. This was memorable and probably the best way possible. I'd become a fan of the Buffalo Bills for a while before this, and it was New Year's Eve 2017. At this point, the Bills team had been in a drought. They'd gone almost 2 decades without a playoff appearance, which is like the record in all Big Four sports up to this point in time.
Mm-hmm.
But they won their game, finished with a winning season that night. But that wasn't enough. They still needed the Cincinnati Bengals to beat the Baltimore Ravens in their game in order for them to claim that last playoff spot. And it looked like the odds were tall. The Bengals were trailing, facing a 4th and 12. But Andy Dalton, if you know the story, he got the touchdown pass to Tyler Boyd. Mm-hmm. Cincinnati came back and won, and they got the Bills into the playoffs for the first time in almost 20 years, and it was kind of all over the local news. People were celebrating, going crazy, and it was, one of the most exciting moments of my life for sure.
And I can definitely understand why, because there were definitely a few seasons in that drought where the Bills would seemingly start off pretty strong. Like they'd win 5 or 6 of their first few games, but then usually around halfway through the season or a little bit after that, out of nowhere, they would just crumble. Now, granted, when that drought finally ended, their first playoff visit didn't go so well. I think they only ended up scoring like 3.
Right.
But the fact that the drought was finally over, that alone got a lot of people excited. And like you were saying, they were watching that Bengals game very closely because they needed that team to win in order to progress.
Yeah.
And I would say even if their first playoff visit in a long time didn't end on the highest note,
Yeah.
I would still say that it was the start of something much better, because since then, the Bills have gotten better. They've been a lot more consistent. They've been visiting the playoffs much more often, even if they only get 2 or 3 rounds in, but like half the time they end up facing the Chiefs, and look what happens there.
Right.
But yeah, they've definitely been getting stronger. So I feel like the possibility of them winning their first ever Super Bowl is much more plausible at this point.
Definitely more than it would have been like a decade ago.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah. I take, and then another football example. I think it happened my first year with Artists Unlimited, about maybe a month after our first production together. I was visiting some family in West Virginia, where the New Orleans Saints training camp, by the way, is held.
Oh.
And there's so the TV was tuned into a New Orleans Saints football game. I think it might have been against Chicago. I can't remember, but they were highlighting, there was one receiver on the Saints team, Michael Thomas, who was coming up on breaking an all-time league receiving record, I think, for like most catches all-time or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And by a wide receiver, I think it was a record that had been held by Colt Marvin Harrison, who had been a teammate of Peyton Manning's back in their era of Indy. But they're keeping count close, like on the TV graphics, and Michael Thomas eventually, by the end of the game, ends up setting the new record. And and I was pretty into the Saints as well as the Bills and a couple other teams, so it was pretty cool to see that historical moment in the making.
Yeah, it's very similar in that respect with the whole Jimmy Johnson thing, because even if it's a simple record or a record that hasn't been held for that long, seeing somebody break a record just makes it memorable in of itself, because you're watching history being made, you're seeing something that really hasn't been done before, and the more intense that record is, or the longer standing that record is, when someone finally manages to break it, it makes it that much crazier because it's such a rare occurrence. And seeing something like this happen with Michael Thomas is a good case of that.
Yeah. And then another, this is an example of baseball. This is just something that's simply funny because it's so rare, I think. A game that was decided by a score of just 1-0. Only 1 run scored that whole day. And it was the LA Dodgers and the Chicago Cubs. At the time, we were getting like the WGN Chicago Superstation TV channel at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And so I caught this game, and one particular thing I remember, which is kind of funny, like when they did the 7th inning stretch, the guy wraps up with, "Let's get some runs," and of course, they never get a run, not even one.
Nope.
And of course, this is at Wrigley, so he's singing for the Cubs, of course. But it's just funny. A lot of no runs, only 1 that whole day.
Yeah, that's a different kind of history-making memorabilia. It's like usually in baseball, pretty much any baseball game I've ever been to, each team usually scores at least 3 or 4 apiece.
Yeah.
And just to go a long baseball game of at least 9 innings, only to have one team score once and that's it can kind of, in a way, be a letdown, but from a certain perspective, as you were kind of saying, it can also just be really funny.
Yeah. And then finally, I said we talked about the Olympics earlier, or at least you did.
Yeah.
This case specifically, the Summer Olympics in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, the specifically men's basketball team, Team USA, winning, I think, over Serbia for the gold medal. Yeah, and they had I think, some NBA All Stars on there, like Kevin Durant was on the squad, and it was just good to see. Good to see our country kind of, I guess, continue their kind of dominance of the sport in the Olympics, and kind of hear them play the national anthem at the end, and yeah, it's just yeah, good, feel good moment.
And there's just something so special about the Olympics. I think part of the reason is because it's just a big sporting event where the world comes together without being at each other's throats. It's just one big friendly competition. And yeah, there have been years or instances where it caused the Olympics to go awry. But in general, it's a worldwide peaceful thing.
Yeah, from what I've seen so far, yeah.
Right. There have been some tragedies. I won't go into those.
Sure.
But yeah, when it's kind of like rooting for your team in any sport in general, but when you see your country representing, or rather players representing your country in any given sporting event, go all the way and win the whole thing, it gives you, in a way, a healthy sense of pride.
Yeah.
Because it's like they're showing how good people from the country can be.
Yeah.
It's like they're dedicated to their craft, they're very skilled, and when you see them come out on top, it's like you can't help but feel excited about it.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm sure people feel that way about like the Miracle on Ice in 1980. But I know more recently went to Lake Placid and got to visit the arena where that occurred, and I can only imagine that meant a lot to so many.
Yeah, I would definitely say that particular game was memorable because it turned into a movie.
Oh, yeah, and because of the concerns about nuclear war and stuff, and the nuclear arms race stuff, it meant an especially big deal.
Absolutely.
Well, thanks everyone for joining us. You can keep up with this series on Seth_Mariano_AU on Instagram if you follow me closely, and also on YouTube, Spotify. And questions, comments are always very much appreciated. You can leave them in the my DMs if you follow me, or in the YouTube comments section. Questions, comments, bring them on in.
And if you have any memorable sporting events that you've watched of your own, feel free to let us know what they are. Any suggestions for future episodes are more than welcome, especially since we're coming in soon on our 100th episode. But any interaction we have with you is loved, more than welcome, and we'd love to hear what you have to say in general.
Yeah. So until next time, see ya.
So long, everyone.